I think I'll be able to navigate this without my notes. Okay. So
It's generally a bad idea to navigate any live stream without notes, but let's continue.
I think that I have them somewhere, but let's improvise. I remember the topics, and I have some notes on my computer, not on my
All right.
notebook. So what was the name? I don't remember.
I think it was
Ukraine without borders. Ukraine without frontiers.
Yeah. It's kind of without borders sounds better because like without frontiers, like we are the frontier. Yeah.
Okay, so let it be Ukraine without borders because it sounds like there's less tension in it. So
yeah.
There can be our Ukrainian imperialism. I can pitch on that too, but let's try it. Let me improvise.
Right, like Ukrainian imperialist sounds very good and like somewhat controversial.
You think?
Yeah. I think it sounds.
I think I'll put it in my pitch.
Yeah.
I'll try. Okay, let's go. So here we start a podcast called Ukraine Without Borders. Some may think that it's about Ukrainian imperialist culture, which is partially true, but mostly we're going to talk about uniqueness of being a Ukrainian or living in Ukraine as a foreign subject. What is it like to find something really interesting in the culture? Let's discuss it together.
Yeah, it's like for this podcast, it is a pilot, so we don't know how it goes. It's just a Zoom recording, and I think it's quite enough as it is. Like Zoom recording is really good now, and it even got subtitles and all of that. But yeah, it's basically about perceiving stuff, perceiving the world as a Ukrainian, basically like getting our voices out. Yeah.
And we have two hosts at this show. This is Yura Sishkovsky. Yura, where are you?
I am in Lviv, Ukraine right now. I am originally from Kyiv. I moved to Lviv just before the war started, or as we like to call it, before the full-scale invasion started. It's just it's really different to call. It's really different names in how I perceive it in English and how I perceive in Ukrainian, because generally when you hear anything, okay, I went on that tangent. We are supposed to introduce ourselves. Yeah, so I'm just a web developer from Ukraine, and I got some background in media and stuff. Yeah, and sorry, where are you right now?
So now I'm in Manhattan, my name is Serhiy Tereshchenko. I'm currently in Manhattan, and as we call it, I went through evacuation. It was a really long one from Kyiv to Lviv to Poland. There I changed 10 apartments, and then finally I arrived back to the US to continue my studies because I'm a graduate student.
And what is your field?
My field is Russian assets trying to create cultural products. Propaganda, dark humor, and any type of snuff. This is my expertise.
Great. Yeah, I think Slavic studies should be renamed this long form, like your exact description of what it is.
Yeah, it's like, basically a burial, but everybody's happy because they know how to perceive it well.
Yeah, I'm just like imagining it like a metal plate that says the Department of Russian Assets Creating Cultural Products.
Yeah, yeah. It's like 200,000 products were created during this year, and 400,000 will be created next one.
Yeah, there is subtext. We are really proud of our cultural product in America.
Yes, true. Yeah, so I'm here to clean a little bit the dirt of the gold in Slavic cultures, and Russian is my expertise. But I'm in the stage when I'm changing my niche. I hope to talk more about Ukrainian culture, and so this project is an adventure for me. I know little about Ukraine myself, I think, because I lived abroad for so long. Um, yeah, but I would be happy to ask you about your experience of being now in Lviv. And besides that, of course, to share some of my findings, because it's just my egoistic desire to share, I think.
I think like egoistic desire to share is not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. Yeah, it's like
Orthodox. I'm not an Orthodox, so I don't feel shame at all.
yeah. It's like someone from my work shared a picture with me. It's, when it's like a normal representation stuff, like a bell curve, like normal stuff is like from very bad to very good, and like everything in between. And Eastern European is like, what is this garbage? And like the last like top 5 percentile, even if even if this is good, I don't like it. I don't like
Yeah, true.
So we have this I think like one thing we share with Russians and share with all Eastern Europeans as well is lack of desire to share anything with anyone, and we kind of suffer from it because like Russians spend enormous amounts of money and effort just to be heard, and no one else even has access to that kind of resources.
True, and they've been really productive in appropriating other works of other cultures, claiming that that's their territory. And now with Ukraine or other countries before, like Georgia and Moldova, they are taking territories literally, they're just taking it. And that's why we really need to talk about what is Ukrainian territory and how it differs from colonial or imperialist spaces. And can Ukrainian culture expand and take the territories that were taken by Russification or that are lost in immigration? Can somebody restore their Ukrainian identity after decades of abandoning it due to coziness or environment? Right? How it's to become a Ukrainian without being a Ukrainian for some time or forever? I don't know. Just this is my question. I guess it just comes from my own experience.
Yeah, like I was trying to explain to somebody, I think to a British guy one time, or like what a Russification feels like, really. And it's not only about, like first things they tried is like outright ban of anything national, like including Polish, Latvian, I think, like outright ban, persecution and stuff. And when this proved to be ineffective, they went out of their way to convince everybody that their national culture is garbage. So that, yeah, it's like we will take anything good that that is in your culture out, and then we will try to convince you that the bad stuff, the hilarious stuff, like the degenerate stuff, it's all you got. It's all that ever been there in the first place. And on that ground, we tell you that our Russian culture is superior. And yeah, like what's even the point in preserving all the degeneracy? You have this great Pushkin, you get a great Tolstoy, and what have you got? You got Sharwari, you have Salo, like lard. It's everything you ever got. So like, what's the point in preserving that? Let's be progressive. Let's be civilized, cultural, like high culture. Yeah.
That's exactly how I see it in culture, Russian culture, that everything that is modern, urban, progressive, civilized, must be Russian. It must be better. And in this hierarchy of cultures, you can replace Russian with something else, but you cannot imagine a different structure of the world and society. There is always this degeneracy and progressiveness. And as I watch Russian films, I see this trope of villagers who may be kind people, who may fall in love, but nonetheless, they do terrible stuff because they're not educated to behave properly. They're not Homo Sovieticus. They're not a human who behaves like a Soviet person.
Yeah.
And this is what makes them so inhumane. So you want to get rid of them. You want to be in a different space. And I guess that's what Russians want. They want Ukraine without Ukrainians, so they can continue to be Soviets. Because Ukraine with Ukrainians destroys the borders of their country, and they'll have to live in a smaller country, and then smaller. Maybe one day Yakuts and Buryats and Tatars will say, come on, like, it's just a game we are tired to play. This is our oil. This is our nature, our Baikal. We just want it to ourselves. We want to make money. We don't want to have a laundry business in Moscow.
Yeah.
And this Russians will, detract to their small culture that is just different, not better, but different to everyone else. And now they're demonstrating this without intention. But that's what we see. They're weak, they're demoralized, they're sinister. And yeah, maybe we have only Vyshyvanka and some 19th century poet, but also we don't have what they have. We don't have this obsessive fixation on violence and really perverse feeling of subjecthood.
Yeah, like on point of claiming everything good, modern, and civilized is Russian. I'll try to share this thing. This is Komsomolskaya Pravda. This Russian. Is it state media or is it not state media?
Hard to say. Definitely, it used to be a state media in the Soviet Union, because Komsomol, it's important to say, it's a organization with ideological function. So all the intellectuals in the Soviet Union were supposed to join this institution and raise in power towards highest positions. And if they were expelled or they did not participate well, it was a stigma. So it's like a compulsory voluntary organization in which every intellectual has to be. And if he's not there, it's his fault.
Yeah, so they published this article recently, May 11th. So what's the secret of Ukrainian army? Didn't they say? It's hard to imagine, but Kyiv was able to glue together a combination of the strongest Russian soldier in the world, a fanatical fascist officer, and all of this under the external control of American generals with terrorist tactics. So already, what's the secret of Ukrainian army? Why are they so good? they're Russian. Yeah, like we are fighting Russians, so Russians are good. Like we are fighting them. Ukrainians are bad, like unmistakably bad. Ukrainians can't build anything. So if they are good, they must be Russians.
Yeah, that's a good example of actually admitting and denying the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
Today I saw news when the Minister of Foreign Affairs says there is no Russian army in Kherson. 10
Yeah.
minutes, the Ministry of Defense publishes, we found spots of Ukrainian army in Kherson, meaning we, the Ministry of Defense. So it's 10 minutes on TASS, the state media-owned platform. And I think that this is also a secret of Russian propaganda, being able to take all the territory despite any factual information. It's about the performance. You know, you read this fascist American secrecy, conspiracy theory, and it doesn't matter what's happening. You grasp the reality. And I see this with, Soviet people who have their own explanation of the reality, and they believe that it's enough to believe in it to make it true. It doesn't matter whether it's true for other people. It's still the matter of like, I have my truth, you have to listen to it and do whatever you want about it, but I have it.
Yeah, like also like for your reference, like Maria Zahara was speaking about there is no Russian forces in Kherson. Like yeah, it's like she was claiming like, Ukrainians were shelling Kherson indiscriminately on civilians because there is no Russian army there, which is kind of absurd. Yeah, and in the very next statement, she said like, that rockets with which Ukrainians shelled peaceful Kherson were shot down by Russian anti-air. So, like, how, if there are no Russian forces, what? Yeah, like, so Ukrainian rockets were shot by whose anti-air? Like,
I actually think that this is an easy task for me as an expert in Russian studies and Russian products, because I understand that it's not absurd for a Russian. The unit that fights in Ukraine, Rosgvardia, this is the paramilitary created by Putin in 2016, probably to address, dissent in his country. So this is a special unit that works specifically to get rid of any strikes, manifestations, and so it's also used in Ukraine to suppress, Ukrainian fight. They're not fighting only with the army; they're fighting with the police and the riot police, Rosgvardia. And so for them, a Russian, I think, can believe that Ukrainian police, as a Russian police, can suppress its own citizens, can shell it, can explode their house to make ratings. What Putin did in 1999. So there is a possibility for them to believe in this because this is their experience. If I critically ask myself, is it possible that Zelensky and his government shells Ukrainians or even Russian citizens in Ukraine or outside of Ukraine? How possible is that for someone who is not in Russia? It's almost zero to possibility. Maybe Assad did it also with Russians, but usually governments don't do it because it doesn't make sense. So we are dealing with this space in which things that usually don't make sense because they're practiced this way. Rosgvardia exists to repress citizens. Probably it would shell Omsk or Moscow or St. Petersburg if needed.
also, I think Russians shell themselves in Belgorod, in Kursk, in all kinds of places. Like at this point, it's not very clear for me that they are not doing it themselves. Still, like we have, I think, Zelensky like not giving comments on anything regarding strikes and fires, like these mysterious fires in all of Russia. Then Danilov, is Danilov our what? He's a famous media person at this point, but I still don't remember his position exactly. He's the head of Security Council. He said he even got on the meme of Belgorod People's Republic, because our just Ukrainian independent of government internet trolls on Telegram organized this Belgorod trolling campaigns. Basically, entire city got trolled with fake news, like exact same fake news that Russians constantly use, but then it was like they were not expecting fake news being targeted with fake news, and so this was incredibly effective for some reason. And this was so effective that even like head of a Ukrainian Security Council, Danilov, he got on a joke immediately. Like we there were posters online like declaring Belgorod People's Republic, same stuff as Donetsk People's Republic, and he said like if you got some separatists of Belgorod People's Republic on Russian territory, that is not Ukraine, that is not Ukrainian business, that is only a Russian business, like a mirror image of what Russians were telling us all the time with Donetsk and Lugansk claiming it's a civil war.
I should tell you that there is one thing that I noticed in Twitter where people don't agree. They don't have one opinion on whether Ukraine really should attack ethnically Ukrainian territories, if it matters at all, that were agglomerated into Russia during history. And it was Russified even harsher than other parts of Ukraine, but probably the same way, maybe with some differences, like instead of saying that there is a Ukrainian language in those territories like Voronezh Oblast, Bryansk and so forth, they said it's just balachka. And balachka, from Ukrainian word balakati, which is not in Russian. So they wanted to conceal, to hide the Ukrainian identity, to make it more Russian. And as I know that people still live in different types of housing in those regions, the question is, should Ukraine think about adding those territories to contemporary Ukraine for different reasons, as compensation, as a symbol that, we just take these territories for 30 years and we don't invest money in them, but we keep them for security reasons. Or we just restore Ukraine as it was in 1918. So we take part of Kuban and Sochi is ours too. I don't see any problem with Ukraine taking these territories as it happened after the Second World War, and Russia is launching a campaign against the whole world. So, World War is not only about other countries participating, but it's also about the world order changing completely. So we don't have Russia, we have Moscow city, with its small state around. Maybe Tatarstan, maybe Yakutia, Brest, so forth. So we have like 20 states after this because Russia was not able to keep post-Soviet republics together and it fell apart. Something like this. Maybe it's falling apart slowly. Maybe it's like Yugoslavia. We're just seeing the process in development, and some reactionary politicians want to stop it, but it has economic and other reasons to happen, political too. People become more aware, they read books, they have internet, they communicate. And I was talking about this, whether Ukraine should take these regions and how should it happen. And the problem is that still political culture is at really low level, and people are not treated based on their identity, but based on their views, let's say, because your identity can be very different to what you say and what you tell other people. You may be Ukrainian, but you listen to Russian music, and in really critical moments of your life, there is no doubt about who you are. You are just a diverse hybrid person, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's always, yeah, it's also interesting to see how Ukrainian objectives in this war evolve in Ukraine itself and in Western media. So for first weeks of full-scale invasion, it was like Russians should return on pre-February 23rd positions. So with occupied parts of Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast and occupied Crimea. And then slowly, as Russians continue retreating position after position, it evolves, and it's now it's restoring Ukraine on 1981 borders, and no peace talks, no anything. Yeah, and like in Ukraine, like inside, I think we knew from the very start that peace talks were empty, and we are only doing this because our Western partners basically pressured us to. Like, yeah, so any Ukrainian that is in his right mind, knows exactly that any negotiation with Russia is impossible and will lead to nowhere. And yeah, you can see you can see it in Twitter, in Telegram, like anywhere. Like you ask anyone, and they tell you like they don't believe that anything will get out of, like we will not get anything out of negotiations, basically, with Russia. But yeah, I think the West relies heavily on negotiations, on treaties, on agreements as their like first response and as a fundamental thing. Like if there are no agreements, we can't rely on anything. But as yeah, like even China relies on words at this point. I don't think, yeah, like there is no power like Russia right now that is not relying on agreements, and that these agreements must be held. And if agreements are broken, that somebody, the person who broke the agreement or the power who broke the agreement must be held responsible. And for Western world and China, it seems like for the longest time it's been the case. And the only power that is not punished yet is Russia. Yeah, so and the current position of no peace talks is completely fine. It's completely okay, and we should wait for more Western arms coming to Ukraine, and I think we'll see this position, the end goal of Ukrainian campaign, evolve into something even more than just restoring borders. Because yeah, like first week, I think even Zelensky said like that restoring 1991 borders militarily is unrealistic. that we shouldn't hope for quick resolution, for quick result in anything, and the only option is diplomatic, like passing Crimea around.
But I should tell you that Zelensky is not an expert. He's saying what he has to say in a particular moment of time.
Yeah, right.
2 weeks before the invasion, he said that this is just paranoia from the West, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Stop telling us there's going to be a war because we are losing assets in our, business.
Mm.
That's where we shouldn't fall into the authorities itself. But I think Zelensky is a good counteraction to Putin and to the whole system, because I met people in Poland, and I know that people around the world actually feel positive sentiment towards Zelensky. Whatever they think about him, but his position, he's so sneaky in some way that there is nothing really that you can say about him. And this is, we know that this is technology. He wanted to be this simple guy who just has his opinions and they're not final. It's not like any other president. And the existence of such system, it's corrupted. It still has nepotism. Everyone is connected with each other. They're not professionals, and they make huge mistakes that have political consequences. But at the same time, people let them do it because they gave them 5 years to do it, and they know that after Zelensky, someone else will come, as it happened before. And this is like different type of mindset in which people hold to power because they have support, because they need.
Yeah, I think, about Zelensky, about his team, I think they don't have to try very hard to to wear this mask of every man. They don't have to try hard, because at some point they were every man. I met Quartal team on one occasion. I was just shocked how rude they are. They're like lowest of the low. Really. And yeah, they don't have to try to look like an everyman, because they in some ways they are everyman, because of their background of so someone telling like Zelensky is a good actor and stuff, and he's just acting out this everyman personality. Yeah, like he doesn't have to try that hard. He just has to be himself, basically, to play himself, and that's basically what he's everything that he's ever done. He's playing himself. He's playing like the best version of himself at a given moment. So, and what we also have to remember about like Ukrainian government in general, like Ukrainian power structure is very much like anti-Russian structure. Like there are always attempts to build a power hierarchy, and some presidents are more successful than others. Like I think Yanukovych, he was very successful of building a hierarchy. He was very successful at building mafia-like structure. Yeah, he was a part of mafia, and he brought mafia-like structure to the government. But I think there is a limit of what can be allowed for any given representative, like president, in Ukraine. So even his successor, Poroshenko, he tried very, very hard to build a hierarchy where he's a dictator on top. He tried very, very hard. Even me as a radio, I was a town guy on radio, and our small student volunteer radio station got shut down just because we haven't endorsed his guy. We haven't endorsed Poroshenko's party's guy. We have been shut down. We have been pressured to leave this business of ours. And yeah, he tried very, very hard to be Yanukovych, basically, but just like Western Yanukovych. He thought that, and yeah, and Zelensky is a result of that. Like support for Zelensky is a direct result for like Ukrainian people saying like anything else but this guy, because we knew already how this goes. So, and we either choose our new leader like a civilized people on elections, or we will have another revolution inevitably. And so like today's government is like a loose collection of actors. Yeah, somebody is doing something. Like Zelensky has tried to build a hierarchy. Like every Ukrainian president tries to build his hierarchy to be on top of that. But I think this time he's not very successful. He's least successful of any Ukrainian presidents. In part because, yeah, I think like just the people are starting to be more conscious about like what government does, what we had before, what we tried, what we haven't tried, and stuff like that. So for the first time like ever, I think we inside Ukraine are not talking about like Zelensky is the end of all things. Instead, we perceive him. Yeah, he's the president. We have our prime minister. We have our parliament, like head of parliament. We have head of security council. We have all these kinds of people. We have all these kinds of actors, and they are acting independently. And it resembles democracy a lot more than anything, really.
I actually want to jump in here with more specifics. So with Kravchuk, he was a typical Soviet leader because in all documentaries you see him saying that he had to compromise his own will, who never knows what was. So we never know what he really thinks. There is no authenticity in the first president of Ukraine, Kravchuk. He just had to play games. And so, you know, he played it and he became a president for 3 years, and then Kuchma came in. My grandmother had to vote for Kuchma, the second president, because she was afraid that someone will learn that she's voting for someone else, a democratic candidate, obviously. And this pressure, this totalitarian pressure existed. So Kuchma was like Lukashenko and Putin today. But something changed, and it changed because of the Orange Revolution, but also because of Kuchma. At some point, he did exactly what Putin did in 3 years after him. He led himself to be the president for the third time, which was against the constitution. And then when the revolution started, he stepped back. He decided not to go into power again. He only asked for some guarantees for him and his son-in-law's business, Pinchuk, who now owns the gallery in Kyiv downtown, and he's one of the richest men in the country. So Kuchma basically took the bank and went out of the business. And he was not, his territory was not taken by Yanukovych or Yushchenko. So yeah, he was the most egoistic, but also it was good for democracy that he was so egoistic. And his hierarchy was absolutely totalitarian. authoritarian. It was about one person. And we see this in politics all over again in Ukraine, that people are voting for people, not for parties, and they don't see anybody besides their leader. We still have this kind of social club around Poroshenko. They're called Porokhobot, or they're called also Porochoskot, meaning that they're Poroshenko's beasts. And they're really easy to find everywhere in the world. Once I said that, why are you so against Zelensky? Is Poroshenko such a good person? And the lady asked me to get away, because she'll be like smashing me right now for saying this, criticizing Poroshenko, impossible, right? He's the top leader. And this mindset of looking for an authoritarian leader is not a coincidence, it's the part of the hierarchy. If people do not believe that you need a strong leader, then a revolution happens. It happens in different ways. It can be sabotage, it can be a work strike, it can be just bad work, or some dark fantasies about destruction. This all comes from repression. But when people really don't need an authoritarian figure, then we have something like Zelensky and his team. The bold guy who got fatter in a few years, probably because now he can launder more money. Then that other guy who is really close to the prime minister, who basically cannot combine two words. Then the guy Arachamia, who went to peace talks with Russia, who was sitting in a cap. And this is exactly the same guy who said that we will prosecute everybody who says that there will be a war with Russia on February the 14th. These are the people who are surrounding Zelensky, and they're forgiven because the power is decentralized and fluid. It comes from everybody to everybody. Why? Because that's exactly what people want. They don't want it to stick to one person who will decide everything. It's good choice for Zelensky that he stayed in Kyiv. It's good choice for him that he did that and that and that. But it's kind of, you understand what he did afterwards, historically. It's not like he will do it and that's right. That's what he has.
And also some time ago, I think I saw it on Twitter and on YouTube, people calling Ukrainian army Zelensky's troops, or forces of Zelensky, which is entirely not true. It's wrong on so many levels. Just perceiving it as such. Even if Zelensky wanted to, he could not become a dictator. He could not become a cult leader. He could not be a cult leader like Trump, maybe. But then Trump is not really a cult leader. You have all these aspects of him that are cult-like, but then he's not Putin. He can't be. One of the first objectives of Russians in this war was to eliminate Zelensky. And I asked again and again on various social media, various guys of various backgrounds, what do you think will happen if Zelensky is killed? Do you think Ukrainian army will just stop because there is no head figure anymore? We are not fighting for Zelensky. We are fighting for our home. We are fighting for not being assimilated into Russia. And even if the top guy is assassinated, it means basically nothing. So it's that hard. It's that kind of thing, because Ukrainian people don't like to. One important example: Ukrainian people don't like to pay taxes. The Ukrainian black sector of economy is huge. And do you think that if government for 30 years can't make its people to pay taxes, do you think the government really is that strong? Do you think the government is really the influence for us or not? Because many things happen here despite of the government. I would dare to say, like, most good things happen here because, like, not because, but despite of the government. So if we choose a head figure, we like him to not get in our way. Yeah, like completely. So
Yeah.
if the army wants something, we want army to be able to do this something, despite of president, despite of some ruler. And if Russia just went and killed Zelensky, like maybe like bombed government headquarters, raised it to the ground, so basically like nobody left of our parliament, like no actual government figures, and just went and replaced them with Russians, there will be no recognition, no legitimacy, because like what legitimacy can Russian installed government have if we basically don't give legitimacy to our own government that we elected? Like 73% of voters want to vote for Zelensky, and then he is still not an authority figure for them.
I want to say here that yes, this is what is unique about Ukrainian culture, is its identification with the government and all the parts of this government. Like in the US, you may say, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. It already puts you in a certain position in society, and this is a structural violence and also hierarchy in which you see what you're fighting for. When 73% vote for a non-totalitarian leader, for someone really amorphous, it can happen only because they don't really care about his rigidity, his particular agenda, and they vote for him because he does not represent this agenda. It's really paradoxical. And there are other things with which Ukrainians identify themselves, but they're not known in the world. We may say even specifically in the West, that because the West tries to defend Ukraine from Russian military power and also Russian structures of information. When you get to an American university or a German newspaper, probably you have people having their own Russian position that is not in favor of facts, and actually it reproduces some Russified information because it's like this. And we may find.
One second, you dropped for a couple of seconds. So if you can repeat your last statement, it will be very good.
Yeah. So many Western sources, like universities or newspapers, can really bring confusion to what Ukraine is, because they still follow Russian information structures. They consume Russian products for their information. And we may look for someone to blame in this, but it doesn't matter at this point. When we can be producers of our culture, can be those who transmit it into the world. And I think that we had other topics to discuss today, and maybe we'll get something out of what we already spoke of as a long introduction into the series. But I wanted to say about the things that we first picked, right? To discuss what alternative identification for Ukrainian in the world, and how to learn Ukrainian identity, Ukrainian culture outside of pre-produced Russian template. And the first thing was Eurovision, right? Some kind of spaces, prestigious spaces in which a Ukrainian come up to the stage and say something. Russians used this for really long. Solzhenitsyn, for instance, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a state-funded dissident, got a Nobel Prize, but when he was in the US, he was praising Russian Empire. Joseph Brodsky, who emigrated from the USSR from really terrible conditions and being imprisoned for being a poet, when the Soviet Union collapsed, wrote a poem that Ukrainian independence is, a bullshit point, and that we need to return to Pushkin and the glory of Russia. We have lots of examples when Russians, white Russians, get prestigious prizes, and then they use it to promote really destructive colonial ideologies. And actually having this status in the West makes their words more important than the words of Ukrainians. And, just getting on the stage and winning the competition, even if it's in pop songs, can be a huge step towards recognition, because recognition is where communication happens. If we have to discuss Ukrainians always in relationship, how does the Ukrainian language differ from the Russian language? What a bullshit question. How does it differ from North Macedonian language, or from Polish, or from any other Slavic language? This is just not the right question. Or when we take classes at university, where we're supposed to learn about Slavic cultures, but in the end, in the US, we learn about Russia and its imperialistic agenda in the region. So the question is how to find direct access to other cultures in the region without buying what had money to be sold. It was a discounted product. Like I see it here in New York as well. Candies that have Z symbols, they're sold cheaper because they probably have to symbolize the intervention into Ukraine. You buy this cookie not because you really believe the brand, but it's cheaper. And it's bad logic, but this is how many people still consume products. What is more accessible is better.
Yeah. I really feel like it's a entire Russian strategy at post-Soviet. Entire post-Soviet Russia strategy on anything is get the product, no matter maybe it's gas, maybe it's oil, maybe it's some export product, or maybe it's a cultural product, but get it to right people for the least amount of money, for the lowest price possible, and with the least strings attached, basically. So for this reason, it's really it's really easy to get into a popular narrative, just because I see on the West, I think listening to Russia on past Russian subjects like Belarus or Ukraine or Georgia or anything. I think the entry point, in business, to the point of conversion, you have this roadblocks, drop-off points. Maybe you got you get an extra statement, an extra button somewhere, and you look at your analytics, and people drop at that point. And you see okay, maybe requiring credit card for a trial is a mistake, because people drop off at this point. So in terms of Russian cultural product or narrative, I think I think it has the greatest conversion of anything, because American mind doesn't have to change how it perceives things. So you had this like half a century long period of talking about Soviet Union and calling them Russians. Like even Georgians, you will call Georgians Russians, you will call Kazakhs Russians. No, but the Russians will nuke us. Like this Cold War, Cold War rhetoric, basically. And when things changed and all these people became subjects of their own, it's the easiest thing ever to just not change how you perceive things. Like, and this is like the lowest price. This is like the lowest price product is like lowest price cultural product is where you don't have to change how you perceive things. I think it's the sole reason why superhero movies are so popular. You can spam superhero movies constantly, like 10 a year, and people will still attend. People will still go to see them in movie theater. You don't tell them anything new. You don't want to change how people perceive things. And if you drop like a high budget movie where the requirement or like intention is to change how people perceive things, like not like point of view, but like fundamentally change how people perceive things, you get something like The Last Jedi, like Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which was like controversial. Like, okay, it was a bad movie, but it was controversial so controversial just because it tried to change how people perceive things, how people perceive these kinds of movies, how people perceive like things like gender roles in the army. Like it's over the head how many things it tried to change your stance on, and people haven't bought into that for this precise reason. So when Russia comes up and tells, or even not like Russia, like American journalists coming out with all these articles, like Russia centered articles, which would say like up to 2004 they will say like they will not differentiate between Ukrainians and Russians. Up to 2014, like why do these people revolt? Like why don't they like Russia so much that they are willing to like enact this bloody revolution only to be in the European Union instead of together with Russia? Like, who are these people? Aren't they Russians? And then some guy inevitably comes up and says, they are very much like Russians, and language is the same. Like, come on, we in America perceive things this way, and we always perceive them like this. And there is no reason to listen to these people themselves, and we will only listen to what is convenient for us.
I start thinking that Russian narrative is so successful not because people really believe in it, but because it's really convenient truth for Germans, for French, for some American politicians, Fox News. It's just, if you say that, we believe this is how it is. Russians are fighting Nazi in Ukraine. Then you don't have to take a stance against a huge army and try to do something about it. You just say, let them win, they are right, I have nothing to object. And this is very sinister, but also it's a way to get away with not doing anything. And I see how the narrative of Ukrainian Nazi is constructed and why it's constructed. Germans say that they feel they're guilty for what they did to Russians, right? And they overlook that they did mostly they killed Jews and the Ukrainians and Belarusians on the western border of the USSR. So these were the people, and we are the ancestors of the people who suffered the most from Nazi occupation. And of course, Soviet propaganda worked really hard and had lots of resources and collaborators in the world to say that any nationalist sentiment is Nazi-like. Well, being Soviet is absolutely good, and it's the opposite to Nazi. I'm struck by how many people really believe that Ukrainian insurgent army is a Nazi SS Halichina. Like these are two similar things for them. But it's piling up. This is what Russian propaganda always did. You have Nazi, you have fascist, although fascist and Nazi are a bit different, but still, it's like fascist. Everybody's fascist. Then you have like nationalists are fascist. Then you say anybody who is against the Soviet Union is fascist, and so forth. You can continue. They still use this discourse for decades, and nobody bothers to actually ask them, what does it mean to be fascist, and is it so important to is it so important to you to use exactly this word? Yes, it is, because it makes all these pseudo-leftist and liberal speakers speak the same language without adjusting it, without learning new concepts and explaining them to their audiences. Maybe generations of audiences are shaped by the same narrative about Soviets trying to cure the world from fascism.
Yeah, like well, about Eurovision again. It was very surprising for me how Spanish perceive things. Yeah, so it's still going on on Twitter. Like, it's really surprising how Spanish bought into Azov Nazi narratives and Ukraine Nazi narratives. Yeah, so when you're looking at Europe in general from Ukraine, you don't expect, you basically don't expect regular people to be in on this narrative, to be hooked. And you only get this once somebody is offended, or maybe or angry or anything. And Spain, of all the places, got like the most offended, and Spanish people keep spamming Ukrainian accounts with messages like, they find any photos of Kalush band or members of it, and they keep like reply camping them and spamming replies with they are Nazis won Eurovision. Yeah, like Spain of all places.
This is very important because have you watched the whole thing?
Yeah, I watched live.
The Spanish girl is not from Spain, she's from Cuba. So there is some weird historical plot twist, and it's important to remind ourselves that only 5 years ago, the last monument to Spanish fascist dictator Franco was demolished. And this dictator was as fascist as Mussolini or as Nazi Hitler. He also caused lots of death, and there are films about this. My favorite philosopher, Walter Benjamin, had to commit suicide on the border between Spain and France because he knew that he will not be able to pass. And here where I'm asked why Spain chooses a Cuban girl and then fights against Ukraine. Maybe there is some really antagonizing forces going in identities. When someone wants to be so anti-fascist, so anti-historical in their own environment, that they fall for something very characteristic. It's a caricature of how it should be, and it's also superficial because they don't know the context. But I think there is one thing about Azov that is really important for us in terms of identity. Definitely, Kalush is not connected to Azov in any way, and what they said was not about Azov, it was about Azovstal. It's a coincidence that they have the same name.
It's not that way coincidence, because the whole region is called Azov. Yeah, they are named after a region, and they are named not after like historically Ukrainian nationalist region or anything. They are named like the Sea of Azov. Yeah, like it's not a historically nationalist region. Yeah, like you can talk about like Galicia. You can talk about there being like Ukrainian nationalists all over the place, and there still are. But Azov of all places, like Donetsk, like Kherson, this like pre-Azovia thing.
I
It's
think I think what's happening here is that they really think about Azov as a proven case of Nazi group that, as I read today in Aljazeera, proven to be the only Nazi force in Europe, and other things like this. And
also can you also find this article and share your screen here in Zoom, just so we can illustrate with their own words and not be.
you need to give me the right of host.
The right of what?
To make me a host.
Make you a host. And how?
I can actually.
Oh yeah. I see it. Yeah.
So,
You're now a host. Congratulations.
I'm a host. Okay. So I'm looking for it.
Can we create a petition to change host to Gazda? Yeah, like being a host is not as cool as being a Gazda.
Okay, so I'm trying to find it. Azov Nazi, I think this is how I found it. It's March 1st. Yeah. Yeah, so.
Cool.
So they are called neo-Nazi, and the source for it is some guy who wrote an article 3 years ago, and he writes about Nazi monuments in Europe. Some emigrant from the Soviet Union who left Ukraine in 1990, and he's the only real source for saying that they're Nazis. They have some, it's all unrelated to the case, some kind of arguments like this. So Al Jazeera surprised me by consistent repetition that the Azov battalion is Nazi. We don't know what is the agenda, why they do it, but we can analytically go into different directions. And some Ukrainians I know often say that, but look, in every society has its own far right. You can call them whatever you want. This is a really weird neo-Nazi because some of them are Russians, Greeks, and so forth. So it's kind of, it's even if it's neo-Nazi, it's not Ukrainian neo-Nazi, it's just neo-Nazi, like they have just their own international view of what, government should look like. Russian government is closer to them than Ukrainian government because Shoigu and Zakharova and some other guys, they're all of different backgrounds. It's not anymore about races. It's more about kind of being like them.
Yeah, I also like while we are on this page, you see like this. It says Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its armed forces.
Exactly. So this
is.
This...
May I end my thought? look, I don't believe in I don't believe completely that there are no guys with swastika tattoos in German military. I just plain refuse to believe it. And the only reason why we are focusing so much on whether there are or there are not Nazis in the Ukrainian army is because Russians pointed finger at it. So Russians pointed their fingers at some guys with swastika tattoos in a paramilitary. So they were volunteers at that point. They were volunteers that were not supplied by Ukrainian government. They were not funded by Ukrainian government, and they just plain went to defend Mariupol just because they felt like this is their duty. So at that point, there was just a bunch of guys who basically raided a military shop, got their semi-automatic carbines, shotguns, all kinds of things. They just went straight there, and they basically defended Mariupol for some time before being included into regular Ukrainian military. So if at that point there were war crimes, there were people with swastika tattoos, Ukrainian government has nothing to do with it. The whole of Ukraine has nothing to do with some guys with swastika tattoos in 2014 volunteering to kick the shit out of Russian soldiers in Mariupol. It's plain unbelievable for me that the whole people of the Ukraine as a people, in minds of some Western guys, deserve to be assimilated by Russia, to be killed, be repressed, be forcefully deported by Russia, just because some guys in 2014 had swastika tattoos on them. Yeah, it's just wrong on so many levels. Yeah, it's plain unbelievable.
I think that it just speaks to particular identities, Holocaust scholars, let's say, or people who are sensitive to the discourse itself. Someone tells you, oh, these are Nazis, they want to dominate other nations, and all these conspiracies, and then suddenly the person is in their anti-fascist mindset that, of course, fascists are aggressive, they want to push their agenda, of course they're armed, and they may be the part of the military right now, but then they will seize power, and they will try to dictate their agenda. All these paranoia that may be real, may be unreal, we don't know, because we are perceiving that through Russian outlets and also their allies, and also people who have really kind of doubtful expertise, whether they can say anything about Ukrainian army, because this is the guy who immigrated in 1990, and what does he know about Ukraine? He lives in the US. So and
also his name is Russian.
Yes.
So at any given point in time, if I read a Western media article and I see a Russian name, I just close it. I just close it, and maybe I'll automatically denounce it without reading. Yeah.
One thing, I met an American scholar with Russian descent who asked me, do I know any controversial historian about Holodomor, the famine that Stalin and his government created in Ukraine in the 30s? And I realized that no, I don't follow people who deny Holocaust or Holodomor. You know, for me, these are just historical facts. And he named one guy, and Kasianov, and I looked into him, and yeah, there were some attacks on him by nationalists. This was reported in Russian news, and I started reading his historical scholarship, and it was not anything controversial in terms of like he just makes a point that yeah, it's factual, blah blah. But then there's this public persona that says no, it's all constructed. So he made his name as a scholar, then as a Ukrainian scholar, and then he says that look, Holodomor is fake. And then you read his biography, it comes out that he's the son of a Russian officer living in Ukraine. So
Wow.
it's like, you know, Kasianov, you know, it's not like every Russian is Russian till his bones, but we still live in the space where there are Russians who live their family history in different parts of the world, and they just continue to spread this ideology because they believe in it. That's their identity to be supportive of imperialism. And why not? It's just one of type of identities. We think that Nazism and imperialism are bad because we are the victims of it, and we will always be like this is our experience, we will not change it. But for them it's different. They always enjoy the privilege of being the colonizer in some way, you know, at least in being able to speak about resistance as Nazi campaigning or something like this.
I think, yeah, I can go on a little tangent here right now, but I listened to a podcast recently, a Ukrainian one, with a guy who printed the most recent Holodomor study book, and how and about the whole situation, because he was not silent about it, and it really ties in perfectly with how things like Holodomor are denied and how people who talk about Holodomor are discredited. So this is all like anecdotal evidence. So I don't expect I don't expect this to be treated too seriously, but this is a serious thing that happened to one or more Ukrainian basically volunteers for Holodomor studies. So there is a institute of basically an institute of historical memory or national memory, as they call it, and they have this, like, as I understood it, a whole department who was working on studying Holodomor more thoroughly, because a lot of more sources now available, with all like older KGB archives being declassified. So the head of, like, the unofficial head of this department turned out to be an ex-KGB officer. And the thing was, they hired some scholars, they hired some researchers, they conducted a thorough study of historical sources, just like to invite some important names that are recognized in, at least in like a shallow Ukrainian like historical studies world, like good names, like people that other people trust in this field. They invited these guys, and they conducted the research, which took some years, I think, if I remember it correctly. But then in published book, like when they sent source files for publishing the book, the number of Holodomor victims was inflated significantly, despite people doing research. So they did all this research, they advertised that these people you trust are doing this research, this important research of national history, of national memory, and they went under this KGB officer, like ex-KGB officer, and published a book anyway with entirely fake number. Yeah, so, and what I think happened is some Western scholars already referenced this book. They already referenced this book. Like, you can't buy it anywhere, but a number of Western Western publications in scientific journals already referenced an unpublished book where which got published by a ex-KGB officer with a really inflated fake number of Holodomor victims and who knows what else, just so later they can say, look, these Ukrainians are faking numbers and Holodomor thus is entirely fake. And they are doing it very covertly. I think if this particular person, the publisher, was not talking about it openly, we would never know that this thing happened. And later, like 5 years later, like 5, 6, 10 years later, we will find out that, oh, Ukrainians faked their numbers. This is the Ukrainians who did it. They faked their numbers. So Holodomor hasn't happened. And this will be coming from the West. It will not be coming from Russia. It will be some Western name who inevitably studies the source, finds that there are no references for this number whatsoever. He will look up the name of the researcher, which is a well-known researcher, a trusted one, thus discrediting the whole body of his work entirely, just because some guy decided to inflate this number one week. This is like, they really do work like that.
This is why scholarly research is very different to journalism and anything else, because if you put it in a scientific book, history is also science, because there are tools to prove what you're saying. You're not making claims just because you believe something. You have to make other person believe you. And definitely these covert operations happen all the time in media, but also in scholarly work. All the politological science in Russia is constructed based on this, on certain premises, how it should be done and what is bad. You know, it's ethical. But with falsifying sources, what I really find confusing to me is that it's a matter of identity first, right? Who does it? But also authenticity. Can we get to the point when we say, I believe it, even if it's not correct? In any kind of, imaginary mindset, I think as a Russian, let's say, or I think as a KGB officer, and I know that it's fake. So there is no authenticity to this number. Authenticity is to prove that everything is fake, So it's really important what you said, that a Western scholar needs to reference it. Because if it's Kasianov writing about this, at some point we will all recognize that, this guy has just his own agenda and he continues to be a KGB agent because his father was in the army, and, he has this pride for himself and his family. He doesn't want to say that everything that his father did, whatever he did, was bad. He wants to say, no, it's actually, we continue this till we can. And it cannot come from Russia because it has no point, right? They already said everything they wanted to say. So it has to go through these paths when authenticity is lost and then it's rechecked by somebody else, and then it comes out that there is no authenticity to this. So in the form, it looks like Ukrainian product brought to the West, but in reality, it's still a Russian product, transmitting through other sources. So we need to be really careful thinking about Russian cultural product to see the barcode, to know that it is produced by Russians, maybe people with Russian second names, with Russian background. It doesn't mean that everything that they produce is tainted and corrupted. It's just like a normal scholar needs to think about this before taking information as it is, because there is a long, continuous struggle between, let's say, the White Russian and all of the people who this White Russian tries to colonize, either inside Russia or outside of Russia, or maybe outside of the Eastern Bloc in Europe and Asia. It's just it's like, if you get this product somewhere on the shelf and someone buys it, it becomes part of their identity. That's it. And when it becomes the part of their identity, they start behaving in a particular way. It impacts identity, because some people believe something is true despite it's just produced by a special fabric, a special plant of disinformation.
Yeah, right. So I think we've been talking for quite some time now. And talked a lot, and this will be a hard thing to unravel for an unprepared listener. So I think we should call it a wrap for this pilot episode, and maybe invite commenters to say how wrong we are about being Ukrainian. I really invite. I'd like to really invite anyone, especially from the West, to comment under this video, saying how he thinks a Ukrainian is wrong about being Ukrainian and perceiving the world as a Ukrainian. I would really like to hear some of those comments, because first we need something to talk about. I can't collect screenshots of Twitter with like every time somebody tells me I'm wrong about being myself. First of all, because I have a life, and people commenting on Twitter, posting on Twitter, seem to not have a life. Yeah, especially those Spanish people posting about Azov, stalking every photo of Kalush member. Yeah, and we also like to hear any questions really about anything Ukrainian, anything Russian, really, like anything Ukrainian or Russian, because we have like so much experience of not only hearing Russians, but debating Russians. And I think our counter-offensive right now, both in media fields and on a battlefield, is really a proof that first, Russians can be countered. They can be countered on a media playing field, as well as on the battlefield. They are not as tough as you think. Their propaganda is not as tough as you think it is, and it all can be countered if you perceive things in a certain way, if you have experience perceiving it in a certain way, right? Maybe you have something to say to wrap things up.
Yeah, I want to say that I don't want to be defensive about my identity, because it's not a battlefield. I'm in a conversation with everybody who wants to say that, you know, there is something bad about being Ukrainian, or maybe something needs to be checked or fixed, whatever. I think it's fine, and it's always good to be ambivalent about who you are in terms of like finding better possible self, like Zelensky is trying. Uh, I just don't really want to push any agenda. I want to point to things that I believe makes a good Ukrainian, you know, in culture, in politics, in understanding how to deal with hard topics, especially if you're not from the region, if you don't understand all of these, you know, complex actors who try to say something else, you know, to shout over you, to steal something from you and tell you that that's your guilt. So that's the point, and that's why I invite everybody to come and to join in into this conversation. Feel free to raise your topics, so we'll be able to openly discuss them, inviting everybody for their criticism as well, because there is nothing bad about disinformation and Russian product, because we are all equipped to address it and, you know, get into this game, because we believe that we will win.
Right. Okay. We probably should have said this at the start of the video, but please like it. Please subscribe to hear more. Are we based or are we not based?
What does it mean?
Yeah, like based opinions, like based Ukrainians stuff. Are we not? Are we not?
I think I'm really fluid, you know, in terms of my opinion. I really want to get to the point of truth, and if I need to change some of my opinions to do it, I'll do it. My goal is yeah, to be open about everything, and that's how I believe a communication happens.
Okay, so at this point, please comment if we are based or not. With all our opinions of Russia, and I can say one basic thing: Russia should be dismembered and destroyed. I think we all can agree. I think we all can agree on that.
It's going to be, because this is what happens to inefficient states, failed states, who kind of were really powerful with their secret police, but you know, you cannot feed the population with denunciations. So yeah, here we wrap up.